Volvo's taking big steps with something with a small footprint in their new smallest ever vehicle. I'm Jay and this is Modern Motoring. Welcome to the 2025 all-new first ever Volvo EX30. It's their smallest ever vehicle, let alone an EV. So there's a lot to get through with this, which is an interesting statement for me because there's not really a lot in this vehicle. Volvo has gone, and it's a weird combination of words, Volvo has gone very heavy on the minimalism side. So you have two flavors in which to pick from for your EX30. You can go for a single motor that gets you 268 horsepower, 253 pound-feet of torque, and that gets you 420 kilometers of range. If you opt for their twin version, which is their all-wheel drive, that gets you up to 422 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque, and your range dips down oh so slightly from 420 to 402. Both single and twin run off a 69 kilowatt per hour battery. Good job Volvo on doing more with less, and the benefit of having a small battery is it takes less time to charge. Let's get into how it drives. Now I am in the top trim Ultra with the rear wheel drive single trim with the power figures in the mid twos. There is more than enough power here. There's absolutely more than enough. I've had it for the week and I've done city driving and highway driving and back roads driving, and I'm sure that the twin version with power figures in the low fours is going to be explosively fast. But as far as what you need versus what you want, the single trim power delivery is more than enough. Now, it being Volvo's smallest offering, it is very agile, it's very nimble, easy to drive, easy to park, whether it's forwards, backwards, or parallel parking. I had the EX40 a few videos ago, and it drives very similar to that, again, very EV-esque, so it's brisk off the line, no problem in passing power at all. Again, easy to drive, easy to park because of that smaller footprint. Now, one thing I do like is that there is a very quick option for one pedal driving, and I'll get into more of that as to why I like it so much when we get to the interior. You can configure one button on the steering wheel to activate or deactivate one pedal driving instead of having to dig through the screen and do 1, 2, 3, 4 touches, having your eyes off the road. So I do like that. I will say that the intensity of the one pedal driving is very mild. Me, personally, I love that. I don't want to be thrown forward if I take my foot off the accelerator with one pedal driving like some other manufacturers have. Here, it's gentle, it's minimal, it still gets you there, and just be aware of how close you're getting to the car in front of you, but it's one of the better ones I've experienced. Now, on the drawback side of that is it's either one pedal driving or not one pedal driving. There's no different levels of regen. So what I want to do is get up to speed. So I'm at 50, my foot's gonna go off the accelerator. Take a look at what's happening on the side window. So you can see it's a nice gentle stop as opposed to being really pushed hard with a very aggressive style of regen braking. Let's quickly touch on the outside. I know design is very subjective, but I like it. I like how Volvo's gone extra minimal, but they've given me old school classic door handles as opposed to something that is flush and pops out. So good job on that side. Again, very minimal on the design, very new Volvo. I don't really mind any part of the design, right? This is probably one of my favorite parts of the EX30 is just how clean it looks. And you have that new logo up front. Well, same Volvo circular logo with the arrow, but gone is the frame. Going around the rear, the light design, very cool. Nice stacked vertical on an angle, but still vertical design lines. Let's touch on cargo space as it transitioned from the exterior to the interior. So with the rear seats up, it's 318 liters of cargo space, and that's okay, that's fine for a subcompact crossover. Now you put those rear seats down and it nearly triples to 904 liters of cargo space. Volvo says that also includes a 61 liter bin of cargo space beneath the floor, so good job there. And yes, there's a frunk, only 7 liters, but it's good for a jug of washer fluid or something small that you could put in there. You know, something beats nothing. Starting with the rear seats, for the size and class of vehicle, it's pretty spacious. I can fit behind myself without any issues, and I sit all the way back, so if I can fit behind myself with no issues, most people shouldn't have too many issues in that rear seat. Because it's a taller vehicle, you get a decent amount of headspace as well. And there's a cool little piece of pass-through storage all the way from the rear seat to the front seat. So I'm not sure what you'd put in there. Yeah, maybe a purse or a couple of things, but very clever on the design side there. The seats are really thin, which also contributes to having a little bit of extra space for your rear passengers. Now, I don't find there's any lack of support here in the driver's seat or the passenger seat. I just think Volvo's done a really good job of being creative with their engineering, of making sturdy and very comfortable seats with less material. They're going heavy on the environmental side, so in the cabin, it's either recycled material or renewable material. So good job on them for that. And that brings us up to the front of the vehicle. So everything's on this 12.3-inch tablet-style screen. There is no instrument cluster, there's no head-up display. Everything's here. Your speedometer is on the top left portion of the screen, so it's easy-ish to look at. I still have to take my eyes off the road for a half second, 1 second just to catch that. The distance to empty and battery percentage are in a tiny little font. You'll see it in the cutaways, but it is just so small. I think a head-up display would have fixed a lot of this. I know that Mini does that. They have their circular, I believe, 9-inch OLED screen, but they have a standard head-up display, which makes it a lot easier. Not to say that the EX30 is unsafe. No one would do that. Nobody would put out an unsafe vehicle. And maybe I'm just a creature of habit by being used to having something dead set in front of me instead of having to turn my head a bit to the right, into the road, and back to the right, just a touch. I don't mind the way it's structured. The controls are fairly easy to dig through and get what you need. There are no physical buttons on the infotainment system at all. By law, you have to have a physical button for your hazard lights, and those are in the roof right by your dome lights. But aside from that, everything else is here. If you want to put your lights on or adjust your side mirrors or your HVAC controls or your heated seats, heated steering wheel, everything is done through the screen. To combat that, there are voice controls, which work fairly well, and it's through their Google built-in, so it's a pretty reliable system. It's going to be a big transition for some drivers who are looking at the EX30. Yes, I know that previous Volvo vehicles had at least a small row of physical buttons, but here it is the new style. It's an all-new vehicle, so it can be done. Again, this is far from an unsafe vehicle, but the learning curve, I feel, will be fairly steep unless this is your first vehicle and you don't have anything to compare it to, or there's no baseline to set against it. There's a little really annoying thing for me. There's a little sensor behind the steering wheel looking at your eyes, letting you know if your eyes are off the road. And every time I look at the infotainment screen for a couple of seconds, it pings and beeps and eyes on the road, eyes on the road. So you can put it off. You've got to put it off manually every single time. You can't just take that setting off and keep it off. The window switches are not on the doors. They are just like a Jeep Wrangler where you have them in the center console, and Volvo's only put 2 here, and they've put 1 button to push down for rear, and then the rear window switches are activated. On the clever side, the cup holders actually collapse into the center console, and you just pull them out. It's one of the better designs, and the actual frame piece that you put your cups in also moves out of the way. So I think that's a very smart, clever, and advanced design. Frees up a lot of space, and pretty much on the floor beside my right leg is foldable storage, which is where my 2 USBs are. It's where my wireless charging is, if you pick the right model for it. And it's not very deep as far as the storage goes, but it's still a nice, clever design. And for all the minimalism here, Volvo has really maxed out on the amount of storage and the creativity in the storage. Big irk for me here is there is no sunshade at all. So not only does it let a little bit of the cooler air in, but if it's a really bright day, I don't really have much of a way, or any way for that matter, of getting the sun outside of the cabin by, having a sunshade or something in here. And yes, it's a little on the tinted side, but I think they could have sprung for even a fabric cover. Quick touch on standard safety. Some of the highlights include a blind spot monitoring, adaptive cruise control, you have your forward cross traffic alert, lane keep assist, lane departure warning, rear park assist, rear cross traffic alert, roadside information, and a few others. So Volvo is pushing hard on doing what they've been trumpeting for decades, being one of the safest cars, if not the safest car on the road. And with a nice long list of standard safety, I think they're doing quite well. The steering wheel is that new squared circle squircle thing that a lot of the manufacturers are doing. And I don't really know why they did that, because the point of having a squared off top of the steering wheel is so you can see the instrument cluster with a little more clarity if you're using long panels. But there's nothing in front of me here. I think they could have just done with a very simple, traditional circular steering wheel. Not a lot of buttons on here, again, as is the case, because very minimal and very thin on design, but high on function. Let's go through pricing, competition, and a pretty big asterisk here as far as availability goes. So pricing is MSRP, and it's in Canadian dollars. There are 5 ways you can get your EX30. The first 3 ways are through the single trim, which is their rear-wheel drive. $53,700 for the core, $56,900 for the plus, and at the top comes the Ultra, which is what this is, at $59,100. If you want the twin/all-wheel drive, you can only get it 2 ways in Plus or Ultra. Plus coming in at $59,900, and the Ultra is $65,539. Now, that's about $12,000 of a difference between the core rear-wheel drive single motor versus the very, very top. Last touch on pricing is that the Volvo EX30 is eligible for the federal rebate here in Canada, as well as any provincial rebates depending on where you are. Let's go into competition, and the first one up is the BMW i435, 428 kilometers of range, base price $54,990. You can get the i440, which gets you 512 kilometers of range. That bumps you up in price almost 10 grand to $63,990. That puts you more in line with the top trim Ultra with the all-wheel drive. Next up is within the Volvo family, and it's the EX40, which I had a couple of videos ago. The single trim gets you 476 kilometers of range, base price $59,950. Jump up to the twin, range goes down to 418 kilometers, and the price goes up a little bit to $63,500. Mercedes EQB is next up on the list. EQB 250 Plus gets you 404 kilometers of range, according to Natural Resources Canada, but the Mercedes Canada website says it's 359. That's a pretty big disparity, so I'm going to go with Natural Resources Canada. So let's say it has 404 kilometers of range, base price $59,990. Jump up to the EQB 300 with the all-wheel drive, that drops range all the way down to 330. And price goes up to $64,990. Next up is the Mini Countryman, which comes in at 341 kilometers of range, so quite a bit lower than what we have here. Base price for that, $59,900. So a lot of these just under $60,000 EVs as far as MSRP in Canada goes. Model Y from Tesla is next. The long-range rear-wheel drive, 525 kilometers of range for $59,990. And the long-range all-wheel drive, 501 kilometers of range, at $63,990. Last up for competition in the luxury market is the Audi Q4 e-tron 45. 463 kilometers of range, but it doesn't come in at under 60. It's $63,400 for an MSRP. And there are secondary competitors as well. There's the Hyundai Kona, the Kia Niro, the Polestar 2, the Mach-E, Ioniq 5 EV6, and on and on and on. Let's wrap things up with the big asterisk, which has to do with availability. October 1st, 2024, Canada implemented a 100% surtax on any EVs that are coming in from China, which is where the EX30 was made. So Volvo's like, oh, trouble. So they shifted their production from China to a plant in Belgium, but you can't just do that overnight. It's a lot of planning and a lot of movement. So any vehicle that was here in Canada, the EX30 for the immediate example, before October 1st, does not have to be subject to that 100% surtax, and it's still eligible for all of the rebates. Again, anything that came into Canada pre-October 1st. So I got in touch with Volvo Canada and said, hey, what's going on? How is this going to impact supply for early 2025? And they said, and here's a direct quote, we still have supply that will lead into 2025. They couldn't give me any specific numbers, whether it be across the country or provincially or regionally, no matter. They said they've got enough to get them into early 2025, which is fine. But come mid-2025, once production ramps up at the Belgian plant and things start making their way over here into North America, you'll see a lot more of the EX30s both on the road and dealer showrooms and dealer parking lots. So it's going to be a bit of an interesting first half of 2025, but know that product is coming. That's going to wrap it up for the 2025 Volvo EX30. If you have any questions on the vehicle, let me know in the comments. I'm more than happy to engage in a respectful conversation and try and get you answers as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. I truly do appreciate the support. I invite you to join our social media platforms. We are on all of the major ones. Thank you for the support. I truly appreciate you. I'm trying to get to 20,000 by the end of 2024. So every subscriber counts. So thank you. I appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.